The main reason for the design and creation of vehicles is transportation. Usually that means the transportation of people. Everyone knows what an efficient people-carrying car, train, or plane looks like. And they're not all that exciting to look at. Some vehicles are special, though. They're designed for tasks that require extra speed or extra power, or moving across terrain that an average road vehicle would have no chance of traversing. We call these fearsome beasts extreme vehicles, and you're about to see some of the world's best of them in action. You might recognize this first vehicle if you're a fan of action movies. It's the Bigfoot vehicle from the film Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. Far from being a simple movie prop, it's a real working buggy, and it's happily still in full working order today. On screen, it was driven by a character called Iron Bar Basie, played by Australian rock star Angry Anderson. Toward the end of the climactic chase scene in the film, Bigfoot collides head-on with the camel wagon driven by Max, and appears to be destroyed. Its destruction was nothing more than movie trickery. Here it is parked in Adelaide, South Australia. It stayed there for many years after the film was shot, but has since moved on to a small mining outpost called Andamuka, where it's the town's only real tourist attraction. It might have been a few years since it was driven anywhere at high speed, but we bet there's still some real power in that engine. If you're in the market for a heavy-duty all-terrain vehicle that also happens to look cool, you might want to consider buying a How & How Ripsaw EV2. The Howe brothers came up with the concept of the driverless light tank in 2000 and attracted the interest of the United States military a year later. The siblings quickly decided that they didn't want the Army to be their only customers, and set about the task of designing a civilian-friendly version of the radio-controlled vehicle. That led them to the creation of the Ripsaw EV1 in 2011, and then the EV2 in 2015. By this point in its own evolution, it was no longer radio-controlled, and had space for a crew of 2. Howe & Howe call this latest incarnation of the Ripsaw a luxury supertank. And it's hard to disagree with that assessment. It's the only tank we've ever heard of that has comfortable leather seating. The name is a little misleading, though. A tank should have weapons, armor, or both. This vehicle has neither, but it can reach a top speed of 60 miles per hour. We're not sure who would want to order such a vehicle for home use, but if you do, it will cost you $300,000. You might have heard of the Hagland as a US military vehicle, but you'll never have seen them made or driven the way that Bill Freely of Roscoe, Montana, USA makes and drives them. He's the inventor of something that he likes to call the Extreme Hagland, a version of the rig that's been souped up and redesigned to be capable of even bigger and better things. Rigs like the Hagland Bandwagon are capable of climbing steeper inclines than almost any other vehicle, because their trailers have independent power to their tracks. That means that when the front unit climbs up a hillside, the trailer pushes it along, rather than dragging it back down again. Freely has posted several videos on his personal website to demonstrate the capability of his creations, which include extreme Hagland units, winching a pickup truck off a mountainside, crossing streams, and dragging 2 or more trapped Jeeps at once. These are the type of emergency vehicles you might call on when the regular emergency vehicles get stuck or aren't up to the task. If you see this next vehicle coming, stand back and give it some room. A lot of room. This is the Litorno Overland Train, or to refer to it by its more dramatic nickname, the Road Train of the Apocalypse. The colossal vehicle probably owes its existence to the Cold War. It was feared that a major Soviet attack on the United States of America would disable the country's rail network, and so enormous road trains like these would be required to replace the freight duties customarily performed by trains. Although its gargantuan size and bright yellow paint scheme make it seem modern, the Litorno TC497 Overland Train Mark II was first approved for U.S. military service in 1962. It's 550 feet long, 30 feet tall, and capable of carrying loads above 400 tons. Extra trailers could be fitted with a capacity of 150 tons, as and when required. Unfortunately, the vehicle was as impractical as it was enormous. After spending $4 million on development and testing, which was even more in the 1960s than it is today, the project was abandoned, and the train was set to be scrapped. Fortunately, it was saved from that fate, and it's now on display outside the Yuma Proving Ground Heritage Center. The Cold War scenario that the overland train was built for would count as a post-apocalyptic scenario, and if post-apocalyptic vehicles are your thing, you're sure to love the Hawk Rat Rock. Somewhere underneath the shell of this powerhouse of an off-roader, which looks like it was built for a steampunk movie, is the body of a 1947 Jeep CJ2A. You'd never know that from looking at it though. That body has been added to with a whole range of tactile surfaces, and the engine has been powered up to the point where it comes with a terrifying 700 horsepower, provided by an engine that was taken from an old school bus. The gear shift lever is another unconventional addition. It was taken from the pump handle of a fire truck. Making use of discarded waste from other vehicles is what gives a post-apocalyptic vehicle its rugged appeal, and this one, with its deliberately oxidized style finish, truly looks like it was assembled in the desert. Just as an added touch of flair, its headlights project the shape of a skull when switched on. Kenny Hawk, the vehicle's creator, says it can go anywhere. We don't doubt it. While we're talking about cars that would look great in the desert, this would be a good time to introduce you to the Sin City Hustler, the $1 million vehicle that's been officially recognized as the longest monster truck in the world. In fact, you might even call it a monster limousine. The custom-made vehicle was built around the frame of a perfectly ordinary Ford Excursion, although there's very little of that vehicle left now. After Bog Toys Racing Motors finished working on the SUV, it was over 30 feet long, stood 12 feet tall, and is also 12 feet wide. Under the hood, you'll find a 521 cubic inch big block engine from Ford, providing 700 horsepower. The vehicle weighs 15,000 pounds. In what strikes us as a bold claim, the custom company claims that the chassis of the Sin City Hustler is unbreakable because it's made from 1,500 feet of drawn-over mandrel tubing. We don't think that makes it totally impervious to damage, but it gets it close. This is a car that we'd be pretty confident of riding out the apocalypse in. When the creators of a vehicle are so confident in their creation that they simply call it the Crusher, you know it has to be powerful. It's a monster truck with a difference, and the difference is that it can climb and crush things that most monster trucks could only dream of. When it was shown off for the first time outside Carnegie Mellon University, it wowed the gathered crowd by driving straight over a 4-foot-high wall while carrying 8,000 pounds of cargo. It's almost unstoppable. The crewless ground vehicle is a military dream. A tank that doesn't require a driver, runs almost silently, can conquer any terrain, and carry almost anything that an army would need it to carry across the ground. That doesn't mean we'll ever see it enter general military service, though. The vehicle is considered a prototype, and the costs for mass producing it are so high that the team responsible for it haven't even published figures. That's a shame. A vehicle this resilient that could be deployed into a theater of combat without risking a single human life for the side who deployed it would be a massive advantage for any army. Our next extreme vehicle is also an American creation, albeit not a military one. It's the Liebherr T282C, an ultra-class off-highway powertrain haul truck designed for one purpose and one purpose only: mining. Officially speaking, Liebherr doesn't make these machines anymore. Unofficially speaking, there are still many units of the vehicle in use all over the world, and Liebherr still services and refurbish parts, so they stay in good as new condition. The C model of the T282 series offers up to 400 short tons as a payload and weighs 261 tons when empty. It was the final vehicle in the series and debuted at the Bauma Trade Fair in Germany in 2010. It's so massive that it can't even be driven on roads. It has to be shipped to a buyer's location in pieces and then assembled at the site. At 50 feet long, 30 feet wide, and up to 50 feet tall when its body is fully raised, this is the biggest dump truck you're ever likely to see. Mining copper and iron is a difficult, dirty job, and you need something with this kind of raw strength to do it. That's also why each individual unit was sold for between $4 and $5 million. The Liebherr truck is extremely powerful. Our next strange specimen of a vehicle is extremely nimble. It's the Chainlink 4x4. And it might be easier to understand by watching it in operation than by trying to explain it in words. Nevertheless, we'll give it a try. This 4x4 offload vehicle measures its axle articulation in feet rather than inches. To be precise, it has 7 whole feet of axle articulation both up and down. To move, the Chainlink is powered by a Mustang Cobra engine feeding a C4 transmission. That power then goes into a Dana 20 transfer case. That, in turn, feeds a 6-inch driveline connected to an inverted, nodular iron Ford 9-inch axle with 5 gears, 31 shafts, and 2 24-tooth chain sprockets. If you understood all of that, you're doing very well. If you didn't, just enjoy this footage of it in action. It's like watching an alien creature walking. Even the rear tires can be lifted 4 feet each into the air. It has wheels, and it can roll, but it might as well be running or crawling. You won't see new units of the Tatra T813 being built anywhere anymore. Even the country that produced them, Czechoslovakia, no longer exists. Between 1967 and 1982, though, this was the heavy truck by which all other heavy trucks were judged. Initially made for military purposes, as so many extreme vehicles are, it was eventually joined by civilian versions that came as either 4x4 or 6x6 arrangements. Almost 12,000 units of the heavy truck were built, mostly for the Soviet and Indian markets, although some also ended up in East Germany and Romania. The military version of the truck was a truly impressive 8x8 all-wheel drive vehicle that functioned on any terrain. It was something of a communist secret until the fall of the Iron Curtain, when Western civilians recognized its potential as an off-road truck and began acquiring units of it to show off at truck trails all over the European continent. You might also have seen it used as a fire truck or an airport tug, or possibly to carry a crane. You don't always get versatility out of extreme vehicles, but the Tatra T813 has plenty. Generally speaking, extreme vehicles get names that convey power or authority, hence the Crusher and the Ripsaw that we saw earlier in the video. Calling a vehicle the Ferret doesn't really give off the same feeling. But then you see the 6x6 off-roader flying over a hilltop, pointing its turd at you, and you realize that sometimes a name doesn't tell you everything. Ferret Scouts used to be built in England between 1952 and 1971. But those old models didn't look like this one, which has been extensively modified by B.J. Baldwin. For a start, he ripped out the 175 horsepower engine from his 1959 Ferret and replaced it with an LS V8. With all that extra power to use, he decided adding 2 more wheels to the center of the vehicle was a good move too. The turret at the front doesn't come with a gun anymore. Instead, it's had a grappling hook and a winch cable attached that could, in theory, help the vehicle cross from one side of a ravine to the other. We're not sure we'd ever recommend giving that a try, but at least it looks cool. Here's a tip for you. If you ever find yourself in trouble in Russia and you see a ZIL Karatel rolling toward you, surrender immediately. This is a fight you're never going to win. These multifunctional armored vehicles are mine-resistant, ambush-protected, and built to withstand just about any kind of attack imaginable. We don't want to say it's the most dynamic and adaptable military vehicle in the world, but there's no type of duty that it isn't suited for. You could use a ZIL Karatel for reconnaissance. You could use it as an ambulance in a war zone. It can be set up as a communications hub, and it can be driven into areas where radiation is high or chemicals have been deployed. With space inside for a crew of 10, it can also transport people through areas they'd never be able to cross on foot. Russia has been using the ZIL Karatel in a variety of locations and for a variety of purposes since 2015. But the next version of the vehicle might be even more powerful. We've seen designs for a new armored vehicle called the ZIL Caratel Punisher, and it looks terrifying.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!